Nike Cole. I'm 20 years old and I'm a poet. One. Is it true you can only have one love in your life? Because if it's true, I found that one, but I'm still young. So who knows what's ahead of me? Am I just ahead of myself, calling it love when it's lust? It gets too much. I got a crush on one boy that means the world to me. But the world's a big place, and in it many things that surround me. See, tomorrow's always a surprise, even if you've made plans, and I've not yet travelled to distant lands. So I need to sit back and reanalyze my thoughts, add up the norms. Is this love? Question mark.
A long time ago, before the book existed, poetry was oral and not plain mystic. Poetry was something that people understood. Poetry was living in every neighbourhood. Storytelling was compelling listening and entertaining, done without the ego trips and no special training, found in many forms. This was the oral tradition. When government said quiet, poets said no submission. So it was a real people's art. Before I called it poetry, I just loved words. I didn't call it poetry, it was just playing with words. I like the way that words sounded, I like the rhyme, I like the rhythm of them, and I was doing a form of poetry as soon as I could speak, my mother said.
I've always written, like when I was little I used to always write stories and stuff, and then, but poetry mainly like year 10 times, so I was like 15.
For me, poetry was all about memorising words.
Okay.
I didn't really think about poetry on the page. For me, it was something that had to be performed. When I was creating a piece of poetry, it was all about the sound of it.
Spoken word is like up, down, round the corner, all over the place. It's like left twice in a week, left lifeless and weak, left to find myself in love when love can't find me, when love took off through Heathrow, since he threw my love away. It's less
I go and perform it on the stage. If they like it, I know there and then.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, I know there and then. So it's the oral tradition.
With my poetry, when I perform, I want to take people away. So they just 100% focus on what I'm saying, and afterwards they're like, it hits them. And I'm just to take a bit of it away with them.
A lot of people who perform poetry, I think they do need to think about poetry on the page. Not just reading it now, but writing it also.
I've started writing a book of poems. But then I don't know if I want to release it as a book or as a recording.
It's not just a matter of writing the performance poem down, because what works on the page may not work on the stage, and what works on the stage may not work on the page. There are poets that we know and we've studied in school that have been around for hundreds of years, and we know them because they're in books.
Poetry and spoken word are very interlinked. It's more, the thing that separates them more, I believe, is the rhythm.
But there's an art to writing poetry down, just like there's an art to performing it. Sometimes you'll find one of my poems that the performed version is slightly different to the written version.
A poet such as like Robert Frost, or be like, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveller long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. It's very, not static, but it's very da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Because I know on the page I may not need so much repetition. I know on the page I've got a lot more scope for metaphor. I know on the page I may not have to stick to that definite rhythm all the time. I can play around with it.
The way you read it would not necessarily be how it's said, so it could mean 2 different things.
I know on the page you're going to be sitting down reading it quietly, whereas on stage I'm going to have to blast it out to you. So you get 2 versions sometimes. To be around for a long time, you've got to have something else to say. I started performing properly when I was about 14. I'm 55 now. It's the variety that's kept me going.
There's two sides. I've got the descriptive side, and then I've got the emotion side. So the emotion side deals more with love, relationships, passion, and then the descriptive side is more about crime, ethnic minorities, diversity, fitting in, racism.
I used to have this thing almost every year. I used to write a poem about police brutality because I was getting so much at the time. But even then, you have to come to it very differently every time. The poet must not repeat themselves.
Certain men get killed when they're raving, and when they get killed, it's like, why did they go? See, I'm dying to know why. Certain mans think it's tough to hype, whether it's on the mic or face to face, but not with the fist, nah, with the knife. With the mac in the hand match, with the click and the bang, on the floor there's a dying man.
My poetry, not just mine, but a lot of poets in my time, was supposed to cause revolution.
And there's no crying no more because he's breathless. And there's no thinking no more because he's senseless, which makes him brainless. He's dead. His body's repelling. Now will his soul enter heaven, or will it fall to the bottomless pit? Though he was taught right, will he do wrong? Because if he does right, he ain't cool, and he ain't white, and white's right, cool. His mum's grieving, his dad's disbelief. Because look at all the violence we're allowing on our streets, but is it our fault?
All the things that we were campaigning for in the 70s and 80s are still here.
Because they'll rather danger us than labour us to keep us on the low. And governments have long decided this shade of colour's got to go, BMP. So they put the guns on streets and try and blame it upon the youth. I blame the education systems who don't teach us about our roots.
Right now in Britain, we have soup kitchens. We have people begging on the street to have to go to churches to get their meals. There's still a big division between the rich and the poor. Okay, you may say it's all politics, but this is what our poetry was for.
Because if we knew about the maths, the inventors and the inventions and how we did build the pyramids, we have something to aspire to, not dying, God forbid. My eyes are blinded. Blinded by the amount of metal hanging on the streets, and my ears are deafened by the shots when he fell from their feet, and I'm fed up. Because tried and soft ain't soft where we live. And the youth, they'll rather fight than forget and forgive. They'll rather strap up with guns than strap up with condoms. Baby mama's claiming benefits. But what's the real benefit, my son, when your daddy ain't about?
We said we wanted to move people with our music to get them to be politically aware. And what do we get? X Factor. If I want to be selfish, I could tell you that I'm successful.
No, I don't want to be famous.
Why not?
I don't. I'll rather release my poems anonymously. Because with poetry, I don't think it's about the author. I think it's about the reader, what the reader takes from the poem or the piece of spoken word, rather than the actual author. Being signed for me is that support, that push. There's people like George the Poet who just got signed, so people are starting to recognise it, starting to get into the mainstream. So it's a good start, it's a good standpoint.
What one would worry about, it's difficult to say worry about, you worry about it as a fan.
Lost to find myself in love since love won't find me, since love left me in bits.
But I think what he needs to be wary of is if the record company says, well, no, we got to bring in some horns and some big trumpets, and we need, let's just try and do a drum and bass thing, and let's do some videos and get you some dancing girls. That's commercialism. That's you chasing the market and not being true to yourself. And record companies can do that.
The thing that drives my art, I think, is passion. And because I see it as a part of me. I don't think I could trade it for commercial success because I think it takes it away from me, if that makes sense. And I don't feel I'll be able to talk about the same things that I want to express.
Yes, I can't see me doing anything else. And I do what I love to do.
My life aim with poetry would just be to get it out there, but I don't want it to be the end game.
My job now, because I've had the success that some people claim I've had, is to inspire other people. Is to bring up the next generation of poets.
My dream job is to work and influence youth and young people. So I could use poetry to aid that. So that's why I'm saying poetry will never be detached from me because it's always a part of me. Yeah.
I used to think nurses were women. I used to think police were men. I used to think poets were boring. Until I became one of them.